Hello from Clio Cloud Conference 2018 in New Orleans, Louisiana. I'm Gyi Tsakalakis.
I'm Gale Kirsopp.
And we're on the road with Legal Talk Network. And we're back. Thank you so much for joining us on the road. It's a pleasure to be here in the Big Easy. Today, we're talking about realization rates as a tool for measuring revenue and productivity. But before we get started, we'd like to thank our longtime sponsor, Clio, whose conference is being featured in this series of episodes. If you like what you're hearing, why not check out their conference for real, along with 1,500 other legal professionals at next year's 2019 Clio Cloud Conference. For more information, visit cliocloudconference.com. That's C-L-I-O, cloudconference.com. And now, let's get to it. Gale, would you please tell us about yourself?
I am the principal of 4700 Group. We are a virtual-based accounting firm that works exclusively with law firms, and we are based out of Seattle, Washington.
Very cool. Welcome to On the Road. Let's dive into your presentation today and the subject of realization rates as a tool in measuring revenue productivity. What should listeners know about realization rates? What are they? What is a realization rate?
Well, we actually started with utilization rates, and utilization rates measure the amount of time that you work and the amount of that time which is billable to the client. Realization rates take that one step farther of the amount of billable time that you actually do put on the invoice to the client. And then collection rates are the amount of revenue that is actually paid off of the bill.
So those sound like some pretty important topics if you're planning to feed yourself practicing law.
They are. They are one of the ways that law firms really should be looking at their productivity on a at least monthly basis and for all members of the firm. And that way you have a better idea as to where the time is actually spent. There is something based on Clio's trend report that's called the missing hours. And typically, law firms bill between 2 and 3 hours out of an 8-hour day. The rest of the time is called the missing time, and that's spent on activities that may be administrative in nature, but the question becomes, what are you doing with that time? If you're working 8 hours and can only bill 2 or a little over 2, that's a lot of time that's being spent on other activities. And is that the most productive way for an attorney to use their time?
Very important stuff. And how do we solve this problem? Where do we get all this missing time back? What are we doing?
Well, those are the answers that utilization and realization rates will give you. Until you know where the time is going, you can't address how to get it back. And that's the first step by far. Where is that time going? And that requires documenting what you're really spending your time on. And Clio gives you that ability if you, in fact, document it. Unfortunately, attorneys spend a lot of time doing things that they don't necessarily document, in part because they think it's only going to take 15 minutes and it takes 90 minutes. In part because it's on Saturday and I don't want to get into the details of trying to document something. But the reality of it is there's a lot of time spent that goes undocumented and there's a lot of time spent that gets globbed together that needs to be separated.
This is something that comes out of the Legal Trends Report every single year, is how much time is actually just seemingly evaporating. And it sounds like these tools, the realization rate, utilization rates, are at least the starting point for actually understanding how big the problem is for you at your practice.
Absolutely. They are the starting point. And until you can document that in your firm for everybody over a period of time, then it's like shooting fish in a fishbowl. You really can't do it. You have to start with the documentation of your time.
And this really applies to solos, small firms, and huge firms, right? Because if you're talking about time spent by everybody at the firm, including support staff and people that aren't necessarily practicing law, that can be big swings if you're paying salaries and losing big swaths of this missing time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Every firm should be doing it regardless of size.
And do you see certain firms that tend to be better at understanding these problems, or is this a problem across the board, regardless of practice, size, practice area?
I see it across the board. The biggest area that needs to be addressed is understanding what it is and why it would be beneficial. It's not just another way to spend your time, but there's actually value at the end of that. I mean, there's concrete information that you can then modify and adjust accordingly.
So can these tools, utilization rate and realization rate, are they still relevant for firms that are not using the billable hour? So if you're tracking time but maybe billing in a different way, can you still calculate these things to understand this missing time?
Absolutely. Not only can you need to. So if you work off of a flat fee, you absolutely, because you determine that flat fee based on the number of hours you felt that the case would take. If you don't know really how many hours the case is taking, your flat fee could be totally wrong.
That's a really good point. So from your talk today, obviously we spent an hour helping folks understand this stuff. Are there any quick takeaways that you can share, or calculations, or at least give a sense of folks how to get started in starting to understand some of these things? I know we defined them, but in terms of the actual calculations, is there anything you can share in that respect?
I think one of the things on the utilization rate in particular is it doesn't matter if an employee or co-counsel or an associate is full-time or not. You can calculate a utilization rate because you're looking at the number of hours worked. So if their schedule is to work 20 hours a week, then that's your factor to consider. So too many times people feel like, well, I don't really need to calculate it for the receptionist because she just answers the phone. Well, she's still an expense to the firm. You need to know what else she does. In the same light, if you have a paralegal who some of her time is billable to a client, but some of her time is responsible for administrative work, you need to know what is that division. You may have an idea what it is, but until that time is documented, you really don't know specifically what that time is being used for.
Very valuable stuff. And of course, like many other subjects, they don't teach accounting in law school. So lawyers can really benefit from actually starting to learn this stuff and apply it to their businesses. I mean, practices are businesses.
Right. Absolutely. They are a business. And it's imperative that at the very least attorneys understand it. You can't ask, you could not ask your accountant to help you if you don't know what you're asking for. And if they provided it, if you don't understand the information that you got. So if somebody just came to you and said your utilization rate is 46%, is that good? Is that not good? What does that mean? I mean, you have to understand what's really meant by a utilization rate.
Such valuable information. Thank you so much for sharing that with us today. Before we close it out for today, I have one last question for you. If our listeners would like to follow up, how can they reach you?
Well, you can reach us at 4700group.com. You can reach us through, we are a gold certified Clio consulting firm, so we are on Clio's website under their certified consultants group.
Excellent. Well, we've reached the end of the road for today's episode. I want to thank our guest for joining us today. We also want to thank our listeners for tuning in. If you like what you heard today, please rate us in Apple Podcasts. We'll see you next time for another episode of On the Road with Legal Talk Network.
If you'd like more information about what you've heard today, please visit LegalTalkNetwork.com. Subscribe via iTunes and RSS. Find us on Twitter and Facebook, or download our free Legal Talk Network app in Google Play and iTunes. The views expressed by the participants of this program are their own and do not represent the views of, nor are they endorsed by, Legal Talk Network, its officers, directors, employees, agents, representatives, shareholders, and subsidiaries. None of the content should be considered legal advice. As always, consult a lawyer.